Hey guys, and welcome to my channel Resilient Ratty. My name is Ratik Datta, and I've recently graduated from Purdue University, having done a master's in marketing. And today I will be talking about a topic which is seemingly on everyone's minds right now, and I don't blame them given the fact that the US economy is the biggest economy in the world, and what happens in the US economy does consequently have effects on other countries in the world. So the question that is ubiquitously on everyone's mind at the moment is whether the US is indeed heading towards a recession. Questions about this actually arose in the first place because last Friday, which is the 2nd of August, there was a report which came up that said that employment, which basically showed the employment reports for the month of July. And according to those reports, 114,000 jobs were filled up in July, which was actually a lot lesser than the 175,000 which was expected. And given that this was the case, there was a sharp decrease in the confidence in the stock markets, which eventually led to a tumultuous plummet of the stock market. A lot of people selling off their shares. Warren Buffett also very famously sold off a considerable amount of his shares in the technology sector. And this was very concerning for a lot of people. And I understand why, because the stock markets are usually a good indication of where the economy is headed. And the fact that the stock market it substantially decreased in such a dramatic fashion, it does beg the question of whether the economy can really sustain itself. And the reason that this actually the root cause of why a fall in the stock market eventually leads to it's something which usually precedes a recession is because there are fears that the economy is shrinking, the economy is falling. There are fears that the economy is slowing down. It's not just slowing down, there are also concerns that it may actually shrink, which basically, when occurred in a prolonged manner, leads to what is officially an economic recession. The two articles there read covered covered the topic pretty holistically. There was good news and bad news, and I will be starting off with the bad news first because I always believe in serving some bad news and then sweetening it up with some good news at the end. So let's talk about the pessimism that surrounds the possibility of a US recession. Unemployment rates for the month of July were at 4.3%, which is the highest that it has been in the past 3 years. Of course, an argument can be made that unemployment rates have actually been very, very low the past few months. So this might not be a proper indication of whether the economy is heading towards a recession or not. But in the strictest sense, there is a rule called the Sahm Rule, which was essentially coined and developed by an American economist called Claudia Sahm, who essentially said that if the unemployment rate in the past 3 months is actually 0.5% or zero is actually more than 0.5% than the lowest unemployment rate in the past 12 months, essentially means that it essentially means that the economy is headed towards a recession or is concurrently at a recession. So given that that is the case, if you look at the figure, if you look at the data, 4.3% is the unemployment rate for the month of July. And the past 3 months, because of that considerable increase in unemployment, the unemployment rate for the past 3 months was sitting at a 4.1%, and the lowest unemployment rate in the past 12 months has been at 3.5%. So if you do the math, 4.1 minus 3.5, you would see that that's a difference of 0.6%, which is obviously more than 0.5%. Going by the word of the theory, it does suggest that the economy is on its way to a recession, if not already in a recession. And this is actually further accentuated and further compounded by the fact that the US Fed Reserve, which is basically the US's central bank, has decided to not cut interest rates in its last meeting. And this is despite the fact that the central banks in the UK and in some countries in the European Union have decided to go ahead and do the same. A lot of people were expecting the US Federal Reserve to follow suit, but they've decided to go a different direction and they've left their interest rates unchanged. However, the US Federal Reserve head has spoken about the possibility of a rate cut in the month of September, but there are experts and economists who feel that it might be too late by then. So this does beg the question of what interest rates has to do anything with recession. So it's actually very intuitive when you come to think about it. When you have higher interest rates, it means that borrowing costs are higher. And since borrowing costs are higher, consumers are not willing to spend as much. And given that consumers are not willing to spend as much, businesses are also are not looking to expand, given that the conditions seem very pessimistic and there's not a lot of scope for growth. And since businesses are not looking to expand and not looking to employ employees, what that basically means is that there is fall in the possible disposable income of the population, which again, it's basically a never ending cycle unless some stimulus takes place, which actually helps increase the spending in an economy. That stimulus being usually being a cut in the interest rates, which we discuss is possibly not going to happen till the month of September. Another very concerning news is the fact that before we get to the news, a little bit of a trivia on the stock market here in the US. Technology firms have actually been rallying the past few months, and this is mostly in part to the high sense of optimism that surrounds AI. And now I have a lot of I'm very opinionated as a person of I have a thought process related to AI, but that's again best to be saved for another day. But the bottom line is that two large companies, Intel and Nvidia, have both experienced obstacles which has impeded the stock market. This is because Intel recently announced a job cut of 15,000 employees, and Nvidia also spoke about the possible delay of the release of its AI chip. Both news is not the kind of is not the best news that stock markets are expected to hear. And given that that was the case, it led to considerable sale in the shares of these firms. And given the fact that these are the market leaders of their respective industries, it obviously did not leave too much of room for the other smaller players, which consequently led to a huge increase in sales of technology stocks. And the Nasdaq, which is very technology stocks driven, technology stocks heavy, subsequently saw a huge decline as well. Well, I did promise some good news as well. There's a lot of reason there's a lot of reason to be lugubrious at the moment, but the good news is that Claudia Sahm, who we discussed was the person who coined and came up with the Sahm rule, has recently spoken about how, and has also historically spoken about how her rule is not meant to be a rule of thumb. It's based on historical evidence where historically there has been a correlation between her rule applying and there being a recession. But one of the very interesting things that I learned about Purdue is that correlation does not necessarily lead to causation. So though these two incidents, the incidents of the Sahm rule applying and there being a recession are positively correlated, which means that when one happens, the other one also tends to happen. There's no reason to believe that there is a cause and effect between these two indication between these two indicators. And given that that is the case, there is some scope that there could indeed be a chance of a recession being avoided altogether. This is further accentuated by the fact that there are certain experts and economists who feel that the only reason unemployment rate has increased to its highest level in 3 years at 4.3% in July is not because there has been a considerable increase in the layoffs of employees. It's simply because the labor pool as a whole has increased. And that kind of makes sense given the fact that a lot of colleges have graduated in the past 2 or 3 months. Some colleges have also graduated as recently as August, which has obviously led to a considerable increase in the size of the labor pool without concurrently also leading to an increase in employment. So a recession is usually preceded by a lot of layoffs, but the unemployment rate in this case is not really as a result of layoffs. It's as a result of an increase in the overall labor pool. So this does inspire some bit of confidence that the economy is not going to fall. Of course, it is a very difficult time for students and for it is a very difficult time for recent graduates like myself who are looking for jobs right now, because the fact is that there's so much of uncertainty around the economy. There is so much of pessimism around the economy that companies, like we discussed, are just not willing to employ employees. And the market is very saturated at the moment with not a lot of employees leaving their current positions, not a lot of layoffs happening, which essentially means that we are in a little bit of a tricky place at the moment. But I made a video in the past which spoke about how to navigate through this difficult time, and I would love for you guys to check that out. There's also a sense of optimism regarding the inflation rates. Inflation is almost at the 2% target that the Fed has set, and if they reach that target earlier than expected, you could expect a cut in interest rates earlier than in September, which will obviously help the markets quite a bit, lead to a lead to an economic stimulus for sure. Another thing to celebrate is something that happened as recent as yesterday, the 8th of August. The 8th of August actually saw a new report come in which said that unemployment benefits have fallen to a record low since the start of July. And that is again very promising news, because the falling sense of unemployment benefits does suggest that unemployment rates are showing a downward trajectory. And if that indeed is the case, that combined with a possible decrease in the interest rates in the future is going to bode very well for the economy. So it's very difficult to say at this point. If I have to conclude this video, I think I think it's very difficult to put a finger on whether we are going to go through a recession or not. But I think it's safe to say that we're not currently technically in a recession just yet. But the the impact and the actions of the U.S. Federal Reserve is actually going to decide where we are going to be projecting ourselves in the next few months. And I truly believe that it is possible for the US Federal Reserve to avoid the implications of a recession altogether. They've done a decent job of keeping inflation rates in check. Of course, they they were at its peak in 2021, but they have consequently decreased considerably since then. So I do believe in the US Federal Reserve, and I do think that they know what is going on and what they have to do. And I do believe that they are well aware of how to go about navigating the situation. So I place my faith and trust in them. I place my faith in God because at the end of the day, even if we do hit a recession, which I truly hope we don't, the the thing about the economy is that just like what goes up must come down, what comes down also goes up. So we might uh, we might hit rock bottom, but it's only when you hit rock bottom when the only way is upwards. So I would just, if you're an international student or if you're just a student who's looking for a job right now, I would highly urge you to just hang in there. I know it's easier said than done because I'm in a similar situation right now, but things are definitely going to improve over a period of time, even if they ostensibly seem to be going down a rabbit hole at the moment. Everything happens for a reason. That's what I strongly believe, and I think it's just a matter of when and not if that things improve. Until then, it's just best to weather the storm and take life by its horns and not let it knock you down. That's all I can say at the moment. But yeah, that's just a little bit. That's just a brief summary of what I read in those two articles. Please make sure to go ahead and read those articles as well. I think reading is a great way to reinforce what you've just hopefully learned. Hopefully, I did a half decent job of actually explaining what those articles meant to say. Do let me know in the comment section below whether you think that the US is heading towards a recession or whether it's already in a recession or not. Which, if you watch the video, I can conclude and say that we're not technically in a recession yet. And for everyone looking for a job right now, know that I am praying for you and know that everything happens for a reason. You just need to keep faith in the process and in God. And I do believe that in the end, everything is going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to be. Just keep at it. Keep. There's no substitute to hard work, of course. Faith is not a substitute for hard work because at the end of the day, no amount of faith is going to substitute the amount of work that you need to put in. So keep putting in the work, stay faithful, and I do believe that better things are in store for all of us. And yeah, that's about it. I shall see you guys until next time.